fallacies of weak induction here, so now we're going to move to section 3.3, okay? And you know what? You've all heard of weak induction. This should be familiar because you remember when we were talking about inductive, deductive arguments in Chapter 1. You remember an inductive argument could be weak or strong, and weak arguments were considered weak because the premises did not provide enough probabilistic support for the conclusion. So this is really a list of specifics, giving you different examples of how lack of probabilistic support occurs. So this actually just gives specificity to what are those types of errors that cause weakness, okay? So let's read the first paragraph here. The fallacies of weak induction occur not because the premises are logically irrelevant to the conclusion, as in the case with the 8 fallacies of relevance, but because the connection between the premises and conclusion is not strong enough to support the conclusion, okay? So they're logically relevant reasons, but they're still weak in the sense that the probabilistic support is not high. The fallacies of relevance, they all were dealing with psychology and emotion. You're not going to see psychology and emotion here. You're just going to see reasons, but they're just not strong enough to increase the probabilistic support. And so it keeps these arguments in the weak category and not jumping it up to the strong category. Now, there were a couple things that I had said on the last lecture capture video. Some insights I gave you to help you kind of be able to recognize if you're given a certain problem in Hurley, and Hurley wants you, and I want you to be able to look at this particular line of reasoning and being able to identify what fallacy is being committed. I gave you some insights. I want to reiterate them. The first one here, let's get rid of that. First one is, don't over or under analyze. Don't over or under analyze. Okay? And what I meant by this is you're going to have to look at these problems in Hurley and look at them enough. So you don't want to underanalyze. You really have to kind of look around for clues, and that's important. But importantly, you don't want to overanalyze. You don't want to be splitting hairs on a word that you're not supposed to. Okay, and I think I mentioned this previous. If you split hairs and you say, well, it could be this, or it could be this, or that word means this, that doesn't mean necessarily you're a very smart and sharp person. It means that you don't have the skill of knowing when you're supposed to analyze and when you're not. Okay, if you're in the workplace, you're going to be confronted with several options. All of them could work. You have to pick the best option. And so overanalyzing, sometimes that's a liability. So this is an art, this art of interpreting. And overanalyzing can be a liability. It actually will make you indecisive. The second thing I said is know how each fallacy is distinct. Okay, if you have a couple fallacies, you keep getting them mixed up. You don't know how they're different. This is where you want to slow down and go, okay, I keep getting these two mixed up. You need to go back and look at each of those two carefully and study them enough until you know how each one is distinct. You remember last time I talked about red herring, missing the point, and straw man, and I gave you some things there to help you kind of know how they're different. So if you're having that struggle with some of the other fallacies, you need to slow down, go back, get your book out. How are they really distinct? What makes one different from the other? And that can help you. The third thing, let's see, I wrote it down here, is you want to kind of have this little principle. Which one is screaming the loudest? Okay? You're looking at a problem in Hurley. It could be this, or it could be that, or it could even be a third one. Your goal is, Hurley's not really trying to trick you there. Which one is screaming the loudest? Which one makes the most sense? Not to overanalyze. I shouldn't underanalyze. But what is this example or this problem really showing me? So you always want to pick for the one that's screaming the loudest. And then lastly, number 4, if you go to the back of chapter 3 that we're in, at the summary section, they will list all the fallacies right there. You may want to go to a Xerox machine and just copy those off. So there's a helpful summary. And so when you're deciding these and you're doing your problems, if you have this list out and it's just on one page, you can flip over instead of going back and forth through the book. That may make this a little bit easier. Okay, there's some general strategies, and let's talk about fallacies of weak induction. Let's get some specifics here. Okay, appeal to unqualified authority. This fallacy occurs when an authority or witness is cited who lacks the credibility in the field being discussed or the authority. And you can lack credibility or have weak authority for several reasons. You don't have the expertise, you're biased, you're prejudiced, you may have a motive to lie in this case or disseminate misinformation. Or you lack it, you're lacking the requisite ability to perceive or recall. Let's say you got memory issues going on. So all these various things, if you see this going on, it could make someone, unqualified has an authority. And the book, remember, it does mention, a person can be an authority in more than one field. So if it says they're one thing, fine, but you also have to have clues that they have expertise in another field. So in real life, a person can be an authoritative figure in more than one field, but you have to have evidence that that's the case. And if you have topics that are controversial, nobody agrees, you can bring in an expert, they can bring in an expert, and you may find your expert persuasive, but that's not going to make the argument persuasive for a lot of people, no matter how qualified your expert is. But, in relation to that, maybe we should talk about something here. In a lot of your classes, you're going to fall for this trap. A real important question is asked, right? And you're going to get several answers. Answer 1, you're going to get answer 2, you're going to get answer 3. Just because people give you a lot of different answers doesn't mean that for yourself you're unable to pick the one that you think that makes the most sense to you, because even though there's a lot of answers, unless they're like, here we have 3 different answers, right? If this had a 33% chance of being right, and this one was 33.3, and this one was 33.3%, if all 3 of these were all equal in terms of intellectual validity, rationality, then you got to throw up your hands and go, wow, I don't really know. But if someone asked a question, and even if it's controversial, and you're going to get a lot of people disagreeing you, just because you have different answers given doesn't mean you can't make up your mind, even if it's controversial. I've made up my mind about a lot of issues that are controversial. And a lot of the answers given, they're not going to be 33.3, 33.3, 33.3. One could be, this is only 20% for me, this is 10, and I think this one here is 70%, okay? So don't fall into the trap. The argument would be like this. Different answers to a question exist, right? Therefore, there is no truth. Truth in the matter. Okay, let me write that down there. Okay, that is a fallacy. Just because you have different opinions doesn't mean there isn't an objective answer, or the top 2 or 3, or even one answer that seems to be the right one. Okay, you don't want to throw up your hands and go, everybody disagrees, this is so controversial, Therefore, it's just one good argument against another. That's only the case, like I said, if it's 33.3, 33.3, 33.3. But just because there's controversy and you have a lot of different opinions, don't fall for the trap that you still can't make up your mind, because the right answer could be in there among the plethora of answers given. Let's say I said, what's the shape of the Earth? And everybody in class gave a different shape. A triangle looks like a tabletop, it looks like a turtle. Someone says it looks like a beach ball. And, others. Do you see that one of them had the right answer? Just because people give different answers doesn't mean the right one is not there. Okay, or a combination or whatever. A lot of people who give answers, they're popping off and maybe they're not that informed. But the point is, do not fall for this type of argument. So all of this is in relation to controversial issues. Controversy still doesn't mean that you can't make up your mind. Okay, that's kind of a little something extra that can help you in all your classes. You have a pluralism of theories. Don't let that make you hesitant for still finding out what you feel is the right one for you. Do not do this. Oh, we'll never make up our mind. There's no truth in the matter. It's just arguments on all sides that are equally good. If they're equally good, you can't decide. But often they're not equally good. Okay, let's get back to what we were talking about. Appeal to unqualified authority. Here's two examples, okay? David Duke, former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, has stated, Jews are not good Americans. They have no understanding of what America is. So, on the basis of Duke's authority, we must conclude that the Jews in this country are un-American. Clearly, David Duke, with this kind of background and affiliation, is unqualified because he's biased or prejudiced. Okay, straightforward. Here's another one. Dr. Bradshaw, our family physician, he has stated that the creation of muonic atoms of deuterium and tritium hold the key to producing a sustained nuclear fusion reaction at room temperature. In view of Dr. Bradshaw's expertise as a physician, we must conclude that this is true. Okay, he's unqualified because he's lacking the required expertise. He's a family physician, and he's not a nuclear physicist. Okay, so he's not qualified there. That's why. Okay, it's just not his field. Okay, straightforward stuff. Let's go to the next one. Appeal to ignorance. This is committed when the premises state that nothing has been proved one way or the other about something, yet the conclusion makes a definite assertion about that thing. The issue usually concerns something that is incapable of being proved or something that has not yet been proved. So let me give you an example here. Here's one right here. Okay, we have not found any archaeological evidence for the existence of Pontius Pilate in the Middle East. Therefore, Pontius Pilate did not exist. And I think, let's say someone said this in 1960, and this could actually be true. Well, the reason this is fallacious is there's no way we have dug up the entire Middle East. The area we're looking at, you can't make any conclusions because we haven't dug up a fraction of what could be dug up. And guess what happened in 1961? A slab was found. They dug up this big slab, and guess what it said on the slab? It said, Pontius Pilati Procurati Judiati. Okay, a little Latin there. It just said Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. So, just because we hadn't found any evidence up to 1960, well, archaeological field, the Middle East, you haven't dug it all up. All you have from this is we haven't found anything yet, but we have no guarantee we're not going to find because we know we haven't dug everything up and maybe never will. Most likely we never will. And so what proved it was fallacious is it should have been an argument from silence. We haven't found anything. Should have only made you conclude we don't know yet, one way or the other, because there's so much we haven't dug up. And the fact that they found the slab shows that previous to 1961, it was fallacious. If it wasn't a fallacy, we never would have found that slab, most likely, right? The fact that it was found shows that indeed argument from silence was being committed. Okay. Here's the next one. We'll talk about hasty generalization, and I've got a little wrapping background. I call it hasty G, okay? You can call it hasty G if you want. Okay, hasty G. A fallacy that affects inductive generalizations. The fallacy occurs when there is a reasonable likelihood that the sample is not representative of the larger group, yet you are using that sample to make conclusions about the larger group. And there's two ways samples can be non-representative, okay? It's when, first of all, the sample is too small or it is not randomly selected. Okay, here's an example of something being too small. After only 1 year, the alternator went out in Mr. O'Grady's new Chevrolet. Mrs. Dotson's Oldsmobile developed a transmission problem after 6 months. The obvious conclusion is that cars made by General Motors are just a pile of junk these days. Well, this is too small of a sample. Okay, Mr. O'Grady, his Chevrolet, Mrs. Dotson, her Oldsmobile, 2 cars. You can't conclude that all cars made by General Motors are just a pile of junk. Okay, very straightforward. Let's go to this one. 100,000 voters from Orange County, California were surveyed on their choice for governor, and 68% said that they intend to vote Republican. Therefore, the Republican Party will win California's 54 electoral college votes in the next presidential election. Okay, this is a non-representative sample, not because it's too small, but because it's not random. If you know anything about California politics, okay, Orange County is a Republican stronghold, okay? All you can really conclude from this is you could safely conclude Orange County will go Republican again, right? That's fair. But all the other counties in California, a lot of them are not Republican strongholds, and if you are familiar with presidential politics, California lately, many elections, it's always gone Democratic, and the Democratic Party has gotten those 54 electoral votes. So you can safely say what you think is going to happen in Orange County again, but because it's not a random sample picking from all the counties, it's a hasty generalization. Okay, let's go to the next one, false cause. False cause, I'm going to give you 4 different varieties. Okay, false cause is committed when the link between premises and conclusion depends on some imagined causal connection that probably does not exist. It is asserted that the conclusion depends on the supposition that X causes Y, whereas X probably doesn't cause Y at all. And you just have to know something about cause and effect relationships. These are hard to establish many times with certainty, and that's why they're inductive. Here's an example. You could have cancer rates going up in a small town. Maybe there's 2 more than there were previously, a spike, and there's a chemical plant a mile down the road. Those cases in court are very hard to prove because of their inductive nature, because the chemical company could say these cancer rates could be caused by something else, just because you have a correlation. A small town, cancer rates going up, and it's correlated with a chemical factory there. Correlation doesn't mean direct causation. You could have the chemical plant there, you could have these cancer spikes in this small town, and maybe something else is really the cause of the cancer and not the chemical plant. Okay, so there are 4 types of false cause fallacy here. I'm going to go over the first one here, and then what I'll do is I'll stop this video and we'll repeat it for the next one. So the first one out of the 4 for false cause is post hoc ergo propter hoc. Don't ask me where they came up with that one. I'm just going to call it, false cause fallacy based on temporal succession. Okay? Here's what it means. Because one event precedes another event does not necessarily mean that the first event caused the second event. Temporal succession by itself is not sufficient to establish a causal connection. Okay, I'll give you a couple examples here. Okay, during the past 2 months, every time that the cheerleaders have worn blue ribbons in their hair, and they all get dressed and put blue ribbons in their hair at home, it's happened before the game starts, the basketball team has been defeated. Therefore, to prevent defeats in the future, the cheerleaders should get rid of those blue ribbons. Okay, they've got ribbons on their hair, the games start, they lose. This is obvious and kind of ridiculous. That is not the cause of them losing these basketball games, okay? Just because it came prior doesn't mean it's the cause. Here's another one, and some people actually believe stuff like this. A black cat crossed my path, and later, there's the temporal succession, I tripped and sprained my ankle. It must be that the cats are really bad luck, okay? Here's the cat at T1. It's black, right? Black cats. And at T2, okay, T2, you wipe out and you sprain your ankle. Okay, just because this happened at T1 doesn't mean it's the cause here. There could be other causes. Okay, simple, you get it. Superstitious people, they'll maybe reason like this. But the point is, something happens before, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the cause. Now, if I see smoke and then there's fire, smoke happens before, well, there's a situation where it could be the cause. Okay? All right, we'll end this so it's not too long. Get you these lecture capture videos in more bite-sized pieces. And we'll continue and finish fallacies of weak induction with the next video.